Welcome to Rawcast, AD. Spilling beer on myself. First beer in about 3 days, and I'm spilling it on myself. This is definitely one of those times where I took down some notes ahead of time, got an idea of what I wanted to talk about. Excuse me. And as I sat down to record, right before hitting record, I got to thinking about something, which then led to thinking about something else, and basically went down a rabbit hole into what was a decade's worth of reflection.
What?
So it started with the continuation of my tale of two cats. You know, already had a kitten that came from a farm a few years ago. She's a lovely gal. Named her Xena, Warrior Princess. Xena for short. That's right, all you Lucy Lawless fans. Kevin Sorbo can get fucked. Eolus is where that shit's at anyway. But, the rescue cat had been astray for about neighborhood of 2 years. And they still don't get along the greatest. My wife named the orange stray Loki. And yes, we're probably going to get yelled at because now we have a male and a female, and neither are fixed. Ugh. We're just... Technically, we're pro-choice, but these cats can't let us know what they want. I'm just saying. But anyway, Loki's been fine with Xena for the most part. Xena does not care so much for Loki. But I didn't realize that it could cost me extra money in the long run. And so apparently what had happened was both cats ended up behind the bathroom plumbing in the basement and found a way to climb up onto the top side of the drop ceiling. So we have a suspended ceiling, and they got on top of these ceiling tiles. And what I've heard from my kids is that a couple days ago, the cats were taking turns running at each other and then basically body slamming them in a fashion. Well, that's apparently what happened in my ceiling tile because they snapped one in half. I can only imagine that they both fell to the floor, and they're both okay. I'm not seeing any of them walking around a little tender, nothing like that, no broken bones. But the fact that they body slammed themselves through a fucking ceiling tile, like some sort of TLC match from the glory days of the WWE, just kind of irked me out. I mean, there's nothing I can do about it. I can't unbreak that tile. Luckily, I did find a couple more replacement tiles in the storage space we have. So, you know, it's easily fixed. But just not being a member of the audience for that cat fight and taking a step back to think about what happened with them and then the fact that they broke this ceiling tile, it made me think about all of the things my children have broken over the years. Raising 3 boys, you can expect broken shit on a fairly regular basis. And so, I mean, my kids have somehow managed to break whole doors, door jambs, strike plates. Something iffy's going on with the computer. I hope it's not actually crashing. But anyway, you know, that's just talking about doors. Then there's the number of dishes, glassware, carpets, walls, you name it, and 3 young boys are going to find a way to break it. So that got me thinking back on all the things that I've either had to fix or just let fall to the wayside because didn't want to spend the money and dozens of hours trying to fix all kinds of shit. And then that really took me back to probably about 10 years ago, right before I finished college. And man, I did not ever expect to find myself in this situation, or at least find myself with these circumstances at this point in my life. And I imagine that my wife would say something similar. I can't speak for my wife necessarily, but I'm somebody that feels much older in age than I actually am. I get along better with people in their 50s than I do people my own age. I'm kind of a bit of a homebody, a little bit of a loner. Don't really go out of my way to attend events because I find them taxing and exhausting more often than not. But 10 years ago, I was the organizer trying to get people to go down to the bar every weekend. I was going to concerts left and right. I was very spontaneous, and what was supposed to be an hour-long study session sometimes would end up into driving down the road to play disc golf or go bowling. Go see a movie. There were all kinds of things that I would do spontaneously. And since then, I've changed. I would say I've matured, become more responsible. But now it's gotten almost to the point where you could consider me a curmudgeon. Anybody that knows me well and respects me isn't going to invite me to birthday parties, weddings, things like that. And I know that sounds really stupid and selfish, but that's just the way I am. If you want to have a conversation with me and get to know me, let's meet up for coffee one-on-one and have a long, drawn-out conversation. Doesn't have to have an end goal other than to, both of us leave that coffee encounter with a little bit more of a spring in our step because we had a great conversation. But if you don't really know me, you'll invite me to your wedding so that I end up doing what I absolutely can't stand, and that's being in the same room with dozens and dozens and dozens of other people, most of them I don't know and probably don't really care to. And that sounds awful, because it probably is, but I've had to accept that fact about myself. There are many things that I could change. I have so many faults. Don't get me wrong. I have so many faults. But that's one of those, the social aspect of that is just something I've learned to accept. A little bit of self-love. Be like, yep, it's time to admit that you don't want to do that because you are definitely not interested in it. And yeah, some people don't appreciate that fact, but I'm being real to me, and since then I've found more contentment with life. Overall happier, I guess I would say, but that's just the way it is. I that means I do less activities out of spontaneity, but I did my partying in my early 20s. I was a dad by a month shy of 23, so I got maybe a year and a half in there to party it up, but only on weekends because I worked Monday through Friday. Never drink the night before you got to go to work, just saying. That's how I am, or at least used to be back then. Because now it's not a party, it's just thirst. But no, it really made me think over the past 10 years of how much has actually changed. And, for a while there, with the whole job hopping thing that I've talked about before, it ended up leading to anxiety. Like really bad anxiety. I worked for a subprime loan servicer, and that place gave me such anxiety that I quit the place on the spot. And so I'll admit, when I started working for the post office, it was high stress, and the anxiety was absolutely killer when I started out. But through practicing with my mind, I developed this mantra of just breathe, fortify, and move forward. And it's gotten, I mean, I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I still have many faults that still need work, and perfection is unattainable. But I went from somebody who was very, very anxious to somebody who was able to slow down my thoughts. And that's why it sounds like I'm speaking almost rather stupidly. I'm trying to keep my brain focused and choose my thoughts more carefully rather than just spit it all out at once and end up going on 14 different tangents in the meantime. And I want to avoid that so that I don't go off onto a tangent far enough that I can't get back to the main trail. But I was able to fortify my mind to overcome anxiety for the most part so that I could succeed at the job that was ahead of me. Day in, day out, one day at a time. Slowly chipping away at that mountain of anxiety until I didn't lose my breath climbing to the top of that bitch. Sorry for using bitch. But yeah. You know, it's not like I wasted the last 10 years. I've been working on myself, raising the kids. And it's amazing to me that, you know, here are these 3 wonderful boys. Wish I could see my wife more, but we're dealing the hand we're dealt. And, you know, also consequences of our choices. But I'm pretty happy with where I'm at right now. I mean, yeah, there's always going to be something broken that needs to get fixed, or there's never going to be enough money, or there's never enough time in a day. But accept it. I mean, we all have 24 hours in a day. We get to choose what to do with that time to some degree. And for most people, that does mean filling up that time, or at least a good chunk of it, every day with shit you don't want to do. Like I was talking about my job and how I ended up learning more about auto mechanic repairs than I did actually about delivering mail. I did not want to do that at fucking all. But I did what needed to be done to save as much money as possible. And now when one of my vehicles takes a shit on the side of the road, my first call isn't going to be AAA. My first move is going to be grab the tools out of the back and start tinkering around and see what the hell's going on. Not really tinkering, but I'm prepared to deal with that. You know, I'm somebody I used to be full of hope, carefree, as one of my friends from college, Spencer, would say, is that the main difference between us in our 30s and us when we were 20 is that back then we were naive enough to think that we were going to have the world by the balls. And we lived like we had the world by the balls. But a lot changes. And and as somebody who struggled with anxiety through my mid-20s and really struggled with depression through my later college years, it's easy to fall into a slump where you feel like you can't get out of bed. You know, it's hard to get off the couch because nothing really feels like it matters. And I found a trigger for that type of mentality. Like, I'm not medicated for depression because I don't personally feel like I need it, and I'm not knocking anybody that's on antidepressants. But I'm somebody that knows that if I really focus on taking those steps forward that I know need to be taken due to my introspective behavior, I can maintain it, but I also have to watch out for what can trigger it. And so, for example, one of the biggest triggers for me with depression is to do up my budget in an Excel spreadsheet and basically try to calculate the schedules for when I should be paying off certain lines of debt based on the payments that I make on them monthly. And for some of the bigger ticket items, like when we're getting 7 years into the future and you see how much you will still owe on that if you stay on this current financial track. And it's the point of that is looking too far ahead. You know, nobody wants to stick years and years and years and years into something that we want to pay off sooner, you know, depending on what it is. Like, you want to go with Michael Jordan in basketball, like, he devoted his life to that. But when it comes to paying off your debt, you don't want to devote your life to it. And so having to look that far in the future, knowing what I will go through day in and day out, managing my expectations, but also trying to plan for the unexpected. I'm somebody that hopes for the best, but always prepares for the absolute worst. And sometimes, even then, I'm still unpleasantly surprised. But that's just, you got to figure out what causes, or like what helps push you over the edge to fall in that rut of depression. And once you figure that out, it's also important to take a step back to reflect on things. I mean, you know, count your blessings, whatever you want to call it. Take that moment to just appreciate the smallest things out there. Like stuff for me that brings me back, since, yeah, I mean, I don't really do much, so I've kept it chill, you know, raising my kids, working, cleaning house, cooking healthy meals, doing all that fun stuff. Like, doesn't really leave much time for me to blow off some steam. So whether it's the exercise bike, the treadmill, you know, doing this podcast, which I still don't feel like I've shaken off the rust or at least hammered out a direction to go with it. But it's figure out what triggers your slide into the rut and try to manage your expectations with that at all costs. But also, you have to be willing to do at least one little activity on a regular basis that's going to prevent you from falling into that depressive rut. With me, I think I got addicted to stress. You know, working over 40 hours a week while I was in college while doing a full course load, nonstop. Work. And so then by the time it's all over, boom, semester's over. Quit one of the jobs. Went down to one job. 2 roommates moved out. Had a 3-bedroom apartment to myself. And I didn't know what to do with myself. You know, I at least had my own place, so I ended up jogging 3 to 5 miles a day, despite the fact that I was loading semis at UPS. Lost something like 20 pounds. Got really in shape, down to my high school weight. And then when the lease was up, I couldn't afford the 3-bedroom place by myself, so I moved back to my very small hometown, population of about 1,100 at the time, back in with my dad. And with where I thought I was going in life at that point in time, it felt like I was taking too much of a step backward. Like, that's when I realized that, well, I developed kind of an angry attitude towards everything at that point. Because in college, was dealing with the depression, but I was loving my living environment. You know, went from living in the dorms and having a great time to living in an apartment, and tried to have as good of a time as I could, despite the fact that I was working my ass off. But I went from working my ass off to the point where I was taking, pulling 3 all-nighters per week, constant bags under my eyes. In my art history class, if the professor threw on a documentary, which she did about 75% of the time, guaranteed to fall asleep. So that I'd have to find time later to basically get the gist of what the documentary is about so I could do my homework. But I went from busting my ass to not having enough work. I maintained it through really going after it with exercise. But then once I moved back in with my dad and things calmed down, that's when the depression started. And so in retrospect, I'm fairly certain I just got addicted to stress. You know, I really hate holiday seasons, like Christmas season. At UPS especially, that sucked. And it is pretty damn stressful with the post office too. But when it's a high stress maneuver and you succeed, it's much more gratifying than if you had an easy day and just accomplish the bare minimum. It's like, part of me thinks I am addicted to stress. So I have to constantly be busy. And what that means is I have more of an itinerary. I have to do the to-do list, the honey-do list. I have to have those organized so that I'm boom, 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 boom if I want to be as productive as I can be. And especially when it comes to having 3 kids. You know, you never know when a 2-year-old's going to end up needing a bath, blowout diarrhea diapers, drawing on the walls with Sharpie, falling down the stairs because somebody left a gate open. Not specifying who, it doesn't matter. What's important there is that the gate was open and a 2-year-old decided to do a somersault down a full flight of stairs. Whoa! Twice, people. Twice. Ugh. But things like that happen because you can hope for the best, plan for the worst, but you still have to deal with the unexpected and adjust for changing conditions. But what I'm seeing when I look around more and more now, especially with like the whole pandemic thing going on, our news cycles basically being a call of the end times. Like seriously, oh my God. If you are addicted to the news, back off of it, please. I know that my best days are when I don't bother reading the articles about what's going to kill us next. Because I guarantee you, if you start talking to your neighbors, as long as they're not too caught up in the political nonsense right now, the world's, or at least your neck of the woods, is probably doing just fine. Mine is, if I knock on the neighbor's door, we'll have a little chat. We're not going to be at each other's throats. I'm not knocking on their door to threaten them or vice versa. You knock on my door, I'll kill you. But, I'm not saying, I'm saying that chances are your neck of the woods is doing just fine, or you are just fine. I mean, there's a lot of struggle out there. We all have our own struggles, and no struggle, just because in a direct comparison somebody's struggle is greater than another's, doesn't really matter. We all have our own stories. We have our own realities, And at that point in time, you both are dealing with your individual struggles. You know, this idea of constantly having our society and country be on a collapse. Like it's on the verge of falling apart. Ugh. I was somebody who absolutely loved politics. Don't care anymore. I keep up with the elections for the most part. And legislation that has to do with my own job or my own, you know, if it touches my life. And I know that may sound like, oh, well, I'm discounting Black Lives Matter, LGBTQIA+. No, it doesn't discount that. I'm sorry, I support your causes. I do. I support your causes, but I'm going to be recalking my bathroom rather than grabbing a sign and hitting the streets with you. And I hope you can understand. I wish you the best, and if I see something show up on my ballot going against my agreement with your causes, you know, we'll talk then. I'm not saying that I'm for segregation or anything like that, but I'm just doing me. I'm doing what I need to do. I've said that multiple times on these podcasts before, but looking at the past 10 years and all that happened, like my wife and I, we make a point not to argue about money. There's not enough of it to go around, and the only person's fault that is well, probably mine. But but I'm also the person in the house that learns how to fix all the things that need to get fixed as they come up. So I'm earning my keep. I promise you. Sorry, boss. Shitter's full. But yeah, it was just amazing the fact that none of this is what I was actually going to talk about. You know, that reflection period that started with cats fighting and being body slammed through a ceiling tile, you know, made me think about a decade's worth of change. You know, struggles with depression, struggles with anxiety, struggling to grow up extra fast, having kids. You know, because I owe them the best. And soon on here, I want to start telling, you know, more defined stories of being a dad that are uplifting, at least. I would prefer that, you know, the good, the fun, feel-good stories. But where is it? Ah. This was from a long time ago. But no, I mean, I guess what I was rambling about there and, you know, took what could have been really coherent themes and threw them in the fucking blender for you there. As like, I was somebody that was able to figure out certain steps in order to move forward and grow as a person, such as overcoming anxiety or dealing with depression. And I mean, those things, it's not like, oh, I did the work. Those are constants, constant practice to make sure that when it starts to rear up, you're able to take control and not let it happen. But then the making sure that you have a hobby just for you. For me, it rotates a little bit. Like, you know, one day really hitting the exercise hard will scratch that itch. But some days after 90 minutes of cardio, I get done and I'm still cranky because I know that I'm sliding backwards. And so maybe it'll be reading a couple chapters of a fantasy novel, because I still very much like to read. But I mean, that's kind of the gist of it. Every now and then I'll pepper video games in, but I can't do it constantly. Otherwise, that actually triggers my depression. Play Minecraft for more than an hour and I start to get depressed. Like, what the fuck is the point of my life? Blech. But you have to have those activities that invigorate the spirit. Think about your why. What motivates you? Why do you do what you do? And you got to try to come up with the best possible why that you can. And though I haven't even really brought it up too much, in terms of specifics, but being a dad is my fucking why. And it can be absolutely frustrating. So we'll start with a frustrating story where I'm pretty open with a lot of things to my kids. So like the older two especially, the youngest being 2, he doesn't know what's going on. He just knows that he can shit his pants and that's the expectation because dad will clean it up. But the 8-year-old and the 6-year-old, I've had talks with them about the coronavirus because, you can't turn on the news without, the kids are going to absorb it. So you can't turn it on without the kids hearing, and it's not like I'm going to be like, oh, this is not meant for you, kids. But so we see the liberal news sensationalizing it. We got the conservative side talking about how much of a hoax it is, and it gets really fucking irritating. But so, that leads to conversations with the kids. They want to know what's going on, how serious it is, stuff like that. And I'd like to listen to the medical experts, and I do to an extent, but if they're also on the CNN payroll, it's kind of hard to trust that. If they're on Breitbart or Fox News, really fucking can't trust that. But it led to about a 10-minute conversation with my oldest because we were distancing ourselves from my in-laws as well as my parents, because between those 4 people, we have 2 smokers and 2 diabetics. So naturally, we just wanted to back off, be protective. My wife works at a nursing home, so it was really important that she didn't take that to work. And if I talked about this I was a little bit on the drunk side in the last episode, but so we end up relaxing a little bit and have my wife's parents and my parents come over. And this 8-year-old manipulates a situation where he's not getting to do what he wants. And so we remind him that it's not his birthday party, it's his baby brother's. And we were doing what his baby brother wanted to do. And so he got salty and decided to try to start shit with me by saying that I said that my dad doesn't take coronavirus seriously. And through the 10-minute conversation, what it was is that no, he doesn't necessarily take it as seriously as we do. And with his job, he can't, none of the people he works with, about 150 other people, can't wear masks on the job. So that was my whole point. We were keeping our distance from Grandpa because, we wanted to keep it out of our house and didn't want to accidentally give it to him, but there was a lot of variables. And so my dad said, you don't take coronavirus seriously. Just trying to manipulate. He didn't get what he wanted. He felt bad, so he wanted somebody else to have a bad time. Now, he's 8 years old. That tells me how manipulative this guy could be. He's got potential. But, God damn it, really pushing my buttons as a parent. Trying to twist my words to get me in trouble with my own family. We had a long-ass talk after that about what he did and why it was wrong. Why it was a really cruel move. Uh-oh. There we go. Screen went out. But then, like, that's just one example. And if I told it on a previous episode, I really apologize. That's just the most recent one because I've kept my cool for quite a while, that there aren't these super frustrating moments. And for the most part, my kids have been well behaved. But here's one that I actually saved in my phone from June 7th of 2019. So over a year ago. But with my job, I've had a revolving door of cars, a little carousel of cars, if you will. And my second to last postal vehicle was, a 2008 Ford Crown Victoria P71 Interceptor. So it was a retired cop car from one of the highway folks out in western Wisconsin. And by this point, I had already gotten my Honda Odyssey. But so we were looking at selling my Crown Vic. It just wasn't practical for the mail route anymore, especially having that minivan, which was better for the space, the capacity for parcels and mail, and then the organization of being able to deliver it. But, so I'm trying to put myself back in the mindset of when this happened. Because at the time we were living in a trailer, and the trailer was run down, and there were a few things that we needed to fix, but we were short on cash. So the best way to get the cash to be able to do something about the repairs around the trailer was to sell one of my two vehicles. And I've only had one vehicle at a time ever since. But my middle son heard me talking about selling the Crown Vic, so he says, "Why do you want to sell the Vic?" And I said, "Well, to fix up the house, make it look nicer." And my middle son replies, "But I really like that car. Why do you want to sell it?" And my oldest son just snaps, "To fix up the house. Don't you want a better roof over your head?" And my middle son just waved him off and said, "The roof is fine." It may be one of those you had to be there type of moments, but to me it was still absolutely hilarious. Where it's like, "Don't you want a nicer roof over your house?" And the roof is just fine. I'd rather keep this car. It was just fun watching my kids' personalities pop out, and that is one of the deepest joys that I can feel as a parent, is getting to see them in their own natural habitats with their own budding and sprouting, blossoming personalities. And hopefully I'm able to bring more of those stories to the table to share with you. But that one about the roof and selling the Crown Vic was a highlight that I've absolutely had to write down because I don't ever want to forget it. Maybe one day we can recreate it into a YouTube clip and basically label it as a dramatization. But I just wanted to get some of that tangled ball of thoughts off my chest about the strides I've taken over the past 10 years or so to overcome anxiety to some degree, depression to an extent, growing up, maturing, and becoming wiser at a breakneck pace to stay ahead of my kids, and ultimately doing what needed to be done to ensure that we had a future with a roof over our heads, even if the roof is fine. But on that note, I hope that I'm able to promise a continuation and development of mental coherence for further episodes. But for the first time in 5 months, we shipped the kids out for a night. It's my wife's night off. And I'm off to have date night, as I said, for the first 5 months. For the first time in 5 months. But so, knowing my wife and I will probably go for a walk, maybe get something to eat from the local cafe, read our own books for a little while, and end up watching a rerun of The West Wing or some shit. But either way, it's been me and the kids every night, other than one, sometimes 2 nights a week. 6 days a month. That's when I get a tag team champion in the house with me to co-parent these kids. But other than that, every night is me riding solo with these 3 little boys who are little boys. Rough and tumble, break shit, sometimes make you want to pull your hair out, and that's probably why I keep my head shaved, so I don't have an excuse to yank, yank, yank. But here we go. Talk about getting the rust off from getting the podcast going again. Time to get the rust off for my first date night in over 5 months. Until next time, I don't have another beer to crack, but let's hear yours. That was cool. Toodaloo.